The smoke had long since faded, but the smell still clung to the broken timbers like a ghost that refused to leave. Tasker moved through the wreckage slowly, his moccasins silent over charred earth. He was too old now to ride with the war parties, too tired to chase horizons that only brought more blood. The others had moved on days ago, following Buffalo west. He had stayed behind, alone because silence was easier than watching younger men pretend not to pity him. He expected nothing here. A wagon train had burned 3 days prior, white settlers caught by Kiowa raiders in the night. The Kiowa had taken what they wanted: horses, rifles, scalps. What remained was ash, shattered wheels, and the kind of stillness that made even the wind hesitant. Tasker knelt beside a collapsed canvas frame, nudging it aside with the tip of his lance. Beneath it, half buried in soot and torn cloth, was a boy. The child couldn't have been more than 5 winters. His face was smudged black, his hair matted with dirt and dried blood. His eyes were open, pale, startling blue, and they tracked Tasker's movements without blinking. He didn't cry, didn't speak, just stared, clutching a scorched scrap of wool like it was the only thing tethering him to the living world. Tasker crouched lower, studying him. White skin, settler blood, a child of the people who had driven the buffalo from the plains, who poisoned rivers and built walls where the wind used to run free. The boy should mean nothing to him, less than nothing, but the child's eyes, they weren't filled with fear. They were hollow, empty in a way Tasker recognized. He had seen that look before, in his own reflection the morning he buried his son. The boy's lips parted, cracked and dry. No words came, just a soft rattling breath. Tasker reached down and lifted him from the ruin. The child weighed almost nothing, a bundle of bones wrapped in torn linen. He didn't struggle, didn't resist. He simply rested his head against Tasker's shoulder, his small fingers still gripping that scrap of cloth. The elder looked back at the wreckage one last time, then he turned and began walking north, toward the distant hills where his camp waited in solitude. Behind him, the wind stirred the ashes, and for the first time in years Tasker felt something other than emptiness. Tasker hash. By the time they reached the camp, a cluster of hides and poles tucked into the shadow of red stone cliffs, the boy had fallen asleep. Tasker laid him on a buffalo robe near the fire and covered him with a blanket woven from rabbit fur. The child didn't wake. His breathing was shallow, uneven, but steady enough. Tasker sat across from him, watching the firelight play across the boy's pale face. He should have left him, should have walked away the moment he saw that shock of light hair, those foreign eyes. This was not his burden, not his bloodline, not his people, but the boy had no one, and neither did he. The next morning, the child woke with a start, his eyes wild and searching. Tasker offered him water from a clay bowl. The boy hesitated, then drank, his hands trembling. Tasker gestured toward a strip of dried meat. The child took it cautiously, chewing slowly, never breaking eye contact. "What is your name?" Tasker asked in his own tongue, though he knew the boy wouldn't understand. The child stared. Tasker tried again in broken English, words he'd learned from traders long ago. "Name." The boy's lips moved. His voice was a whisper, barely audible. "Jacob." Tasker nodded slowly, then he touched his own chest. "Tasker." The boy repeated it, soft and uncertain. "Tasker." For 3 days they lived in silence. The boy followed him like a shadow, gathering wood, fetching water, watching as Tasker prepared food and tended the fire. He never asked questions, never cried. It was as if something inside him had been burned away along with everything else. On the 4th day, Tasker handed him a small knife, dulled with age but still useful. The boy took it, his eyes wide. "You stay," Tasker said in English. "You learn." The boy nodded. That night, as the stars spread across the sky like scattered seeds, Tasker made a decision. He would not take the boy to the nearest fort, would not hand him over to soldiers or missionaries who would strip him of this second chance at life. The child had died in that fire. What remained was something else, something new. He would raise him as Comanche, teach him to ride, to hunt, to survive, teach him the language of the land and the sky. And if the boy chose to leave one day, so be it. But until then he would not be Jacob. He would be Kohana, swift, The boy looked up at him from across the fire, and for the first time something flickered in those pale eyes. Not fear, not emptiness, hope, but the world, Tasker knew, had a way of testing hope, and it was already on its way. Tasker, hash. The whispers reached them 6 moons later. By then Kohana had learned to string a bow, to track deer through brush, to move without sound. His skin had darkened under the sun, his hair grown long and wild. He spoke more Comanche than English now, and when he smiled, rare but real, it was the smile of a boy who had forgotten what it meant to be afraid. But the past, Tasker knew, never stayed buried. It began with a rider, a young warrior from a neighboring band, passing through with news. He spoke quickly, urgently, his eyes darting toward Kohana as he sat sharpening arrowheads near the fire. "There are soldiers," the rider said in their tongue, "2 days east. They search for a white child. Taken, they say, by Comanche." Tasker's jaw tightened. "Taken, they say he was stolen, that we are hiding him." The rider's voice dropped. "They offer horses, rifles. They say they will burn camps if we do not return him." Kohana looked up, sensing the shift in the air. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tension. Tasker dismissed the rider with a curt nod. When they were alone again, he turned to the boy. "You must hide." Kohana frowned. "Why?" "Men come, white men. They look for you." The boy's face went pale. For the first time in months that hollow look returned to his eyes. "They want me back." Tasker hesitated. "They think you are theirs." "I'm not." The words came fast, desperate. "I'm not theirs. He stopped. His hands trembled. Tasker knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I know." But knowing wouldn't stop what was coming. 3 days later the soldiers arrived. Tasker heard them before he saw them. Hoofbeats, slow and deliberate, echoing off the canyon walls. He stepped outside, his lance in hand, and watched as a line of blue-coated men emerged from the dust. 6 of them, led by a lieutenant with a hard face and a Bible tucked into his belt. The lieutenant dismounted, his eyes scanning the camp. They landed on Kohana, who stood behind Tasker, half hidden in shadow. "That him?" the lieutenant asked, his voice flat. Tasker said nothing. The lieutenant took a step forward. "We've been looking for that boy for months. His family's dead, but we got orders to bring him back. He belongs with his own kind." Tasker's grip tightened on his lance. "He stays." The lieutenant's hand moved to his sidearm, and the air between them crackled like a storm about to break. Tasker hash. The standoff lasted only seconds, but it felt like hours. Finally the lieutenant exhaled and raised his hand, signaling his men to stand down. "I'm not here to start a war, old man, but I'm not leaving without the boy either." Tasker didn't move. The lieutenant looked past him, directly at Kohana. "Son, you understand me?" Kohana's jaw clenched. He stepped forward, out of the shadow, and met the man's gaze. "I understand." "Good. Then you know you don't belong here. You're white. You got people. I got no people." Kohana said, his voice steady. "They burned. I was there." The lieutenant faltered. You saw it." Kohana nodded slowly. "I saw everything." For the first time something flickered in the lieutenant's expression. Not pity, something heavier. Regret, maybe, or recognition. He glanced back at his men, then at Tasker. "Listen, I got orders, but I'm not blind. I see what this is." He paused. "You give me your word the boy's safe here, that he's being cared for, and I'll tell them we couldn't find him. But if I hear otherwise, if I hear he's been mistreated or put in harm's way, I'll come back. And I won't come alone." Tasker studied him for a long moment. Then he spoke, slow and measured. "He is my son now." The lieutenant blinked. "Your son?" "Yes." Kohana looked up at Tasker, his eyes wide. The lieutenant rubbed his jaw, thinking. Finally he nodded. All right, all right." He turned to mount his horse, then paused. "What's his name?" "The one you gave him." "Kohana." The lieutenant repeated it under his breath. Then he looked at the boy one last time. "You take care, Kohana." The soldiers rode off, their silhouettes disappearing into the heat. Kohana stood beside Tasker, watching them go. After a long silence he spoke. "You called me your son." Tasker didn't look at him. "You are." The boy's throat tightened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the scorched scrap of cloth, the one he'd been holding the day Tasker found him. He stared at it for a moment, then let it fall to the ground. The wind carried it away, and for the first time since the fire, Kohana felt whole. Tasker, harsh. The years that followed were not easy, but they were full. Kohana grew tall and strong, his body hardened by the plains, his mind shaped by Tasker's teachings. He learned the stories of the Comanche, the way they honored the earth, the way they moved with the seasons, the way they survived when the world tried to break them. He learned to ride like the wind, to shoot with precision, to read the language of clouds and stars. But he also learned grief. He learned that survival meant loss, that strength meant sacrifice, and that love, real love, was not given freely, it was earned, one quiet moment at a time. When Kohana turned 16, Tasker grew ill. His body, worn by time and memory, began to fail him. He spent his days near the fire, wrapped in blankets, his breath growing shallower with each passing week. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the cliffs in shades of gold, Kohana sat beside him. "You gave me a life," Kohana said softly, "when I had nothing." Tasker's eyes, dim now, but still sharp, found his. "I gave you a choice. You chose to live it. I chose you." Tasker smiled, faint, but real. "Then I am a lucky man." That night, under a sky filled with stars, Tasker passed quietly, his hand resting on Kohana's shoulder. Kohana buried him on the hill overlooking the canyon, in the place where the wind never stopped singing. He placed Tasker's lance beside him, along with a single eagle feather, the mark of a warrior, and then he stood, alone, and looked out over the endless plains. Years later, when Kohana had children of his own, he would tell them the story of the elder who found a boy in the ruins. He would teach them the language Tasker had taught him, the songs, the prayers. He would tell them that family was not only blood, it was choice. And on quiet nights, when the fire burned low and the stars came out, he would look toward the hills and remember the man who had given him more than survival. He had given him a name, a people, a home. And as the wind whispered through the canyon, Kohana would close his eyes and hear it, Tasker's voice, steady and sure, calling him back across the years. "You are my son." And he was.